I want to be clear about something before I answer the board's questions. I was not trying to do anything. I was trying to deliver a transit form to the East Corridor desk before the ceremony started, because Sub-Officer Holland had asked me twice that morning to get it there before the gallery doors closed, and I kept forgetting. And at that point in my border service career, my most reliable skill was forgetting small administrative tasks at the worst possible moments. I was not performing an act of recognition. I was not conducting an unauthorized behavioral assessment. I was walking down an approach lane with a folded piece of paper in my hand, trying not to be late for my own graduation. That is what I told the Honors Board's intake clerk when she asked me to summarize the incident. She looked at me for a long time, and then she wrote something down, and then she asked me to please say it again for the record, and I did. The board has the formal citation from behavioral observer Neth Sorvak, who was stationed in the upper gallery tier that morning. I have read Neth Sorvak's citation. I understand that from the gallery, what happened had a particular shape, that it looked like something deliberate, something earned, something that a person might plan for or train toward. I am not contradicting the citation. I am only saying that from my position, at floor level, carrying a transit form and watching where I was putting my feet, it did not feel like any of those things. I will tell the board what I remember. The Vethkar Station formal passing hall is the largest enclosed space I have ever stood in. I had been told this before the ceremony. My cohort senior, Doran Keth, had been stationed at Vethkar for a logistics rotation 2 years earlier, and he had described the hall to us the night before in the detail that people who have experienced something enormous sometimes use, which is the detail of a person who wants someone else to understand the size of the thing they saw, so they will not have to carry the understanding alone. He told us the gallery tiers rose 40 meters from the parade floor. He told us that when all 4,000 seats were occupied and the gallery was quiet, you could hear the ventilation system in the subfloor plating. He told us the parade floor was big enough that the cadets at the far end of the formation lines looked like figures on a document, small and flat and far away. I had listened and thought, as I generally thought when Doran described large things, that he was probably exaggerating. He was not exaggerating. The night before the ceremony, the briefing had been held in the cohort assembly room at 2000 station time. There were 42 of us in the graduating class. Doran had been asked to lead it, because Doran had been at Vethkar before, and because Doran has the quality of seeming reliable, even when he is only describing things he remembers from 2 years ago and cannot verify. We sat in the assembly room in our chairs, and Doran stood at the front with a display screen that he did not use, because everything he had to say he had memorized, and he told us what the ceremony would be like. He told us about the hall, and about the gallery, and about the formation lines, and about the protocol for the citation presentation. He told us, as I mentioned, that the Sorath would be present. He spent more time on this than on any other element of the briefing, which I think was because he had seen the ceremony from the gallery and understood that the Sorath were the thing most likely to be underestimated by someone who had only seen the photographs. He said, "The photographs do not communicate the scale. In the photographs, they look like large animals. In person, they look like something the station was built around." Someone in the back row asked whether they were dangerous. Doran said, "In the sense that they are capable of being dangerous, yes. In the sense that they have harmed anyone at a passing ceremony in the 30 years they have been used for them, no. They are there to make you feel the weight of what you are walking into. They do this effectively." The same person asked, "What should we do if one of them gets close?" Doran said, "The handlers will be managing them. They won't get close." He paused. "But if one does, stay calm, don't run, don't make a sudden movement. They respond to calm." He moved on to the next element of the briefing. I thought about this advice the next morning while I was standing in the East Corridor waiting for the transit desk to open. I thought, stay calm, don't run, don't make a sudden movement. It seemed like sound advice. It was, as far as I can tell, what I did. I walked into the passing hall at 06:03 station time, which was 12 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin, because I had woken at 05:15 with the transit form already on my mind, and I had been in the East Corridor at 05:35 to find that the transit desk did not open until 600, and so I had stood in the corridor for 25 minutes in my dress uniform, with the form folded in my hand, and by the time the desk clerk arrived and opened the window, I had been standing long enough that my left boot had developed a pressure point behind it, the ankle that I could feel with every step. The transit desk clerk looked at me, and at the form, and at the time, and said, with the particular gentleness of someone being kind to a person they feel sorry for, that she could have processed this by post. I said I understood that now, and I thanked her, and I turned to walk back to the ceremony. The passing hall's main approach is a wide service corridor that runs from the east wing of the station through to the parade floor access doors, 300 meters of plated flooring and strip lighting, with the gallery access lifts on the right and the ceremonial equipment bays on the left. I had entered through the east wing, so the corridor was the natural path back. I was moving quickly by then, because the transit desk interaction had taken longer than I'd hoped, and the gallery doors would close in 7 minutes. The equipment bays on the left side of the corridor are where they stage the ceremony's secondary elements before the floor crew wheels them out. Display cases, the brass speaker units, the compact's formal processing banners, and, on the morning of a passing ceremony for a border service graduating class, the Sorath. I knew the Sorath were part of the ceremony. Every graduating class is told, as part of the briefing the night before, that the Sorath are brought out as the final display element, that they will enter the parade floor after the presiding officer's remarks and walk the outer ceremony lane before the graduating cadets are called forward for their citations. We are told why this happens. The Sorath are the compact's formal passing ceremony animals for a reason that Doran, who had seen a ceremony from the gallery, told us plainly. They are there to make you feel small. Not in a cruel way, he said. In the way that helps. In the way that tells you the universe is larger than your confidence in it, and that the thing you are walking into is genuinely serious, and that the weight of the work you are accepting is real weight and not a formality. I had processed this information the night before, and thought it seemed reasonable. I had not thought about it again, because by the time Doran finished the briefing, I was already thinking about the transit form, and whether I could get it to the desk before the parade. Gallery doors closed, so I was not thinking about the Sorath when I turned the corner into the last section of the approach corridor, and found them standing in my way. There were 3 of them. I know now that there were 3 handler teams, and a secondary support crew, and a behavioral registry observer stationed near the bay door. But at the moment I turned the corner I saw the animals, and I did not see anyone else. Because when you round a corner and find a Sorath standing 15 meters in front of you, your attention goes to the Sorath. I had seen photographs of the Sorath in the training files. Enclosed corridor. The Alpha, I know her name now, she is called Vale, was the size of a large cargo transporter, though the comparison does not quite work because cargo transporters are a fixed rectangular shape, and Vale is not fixed and not rectangular. She was broad across the shoulder ridge, which is the highest point of a Sorath's body when they are in the low carry posture they use in enclosed spaces, and the ridge plating along her spine caught the strip lighting above, and threw back a matte iron gleam that made her look like something that had been pressed from the station's hull plating. Her forelimbs, twin-knuckled, wide across the heel, the claws down and not extended or flat on the floor. Her head was turned slightly to the left, which meant her near eye, pale amber, the color of old paper, the size of a dinner plate, was facing me. Behind her, in the looser arrangement that the training files called the transit formation, were the two subadults. I know their names are Reth and Or. At the time I just thought, there are two more. I stopped walking. The handler teams, I can tell you now, were against the left wall of the corridor. I did not see them. I stopped walking, and I stood with the transit form in my right hand and my left boot, creating its pressure point behind my ankle, and I looked at Vale, and Vale looked at me. The way Doran had said you could, though in the corridor it was less a sound and more a presence, a low vibration that I might have mistaken for the Sorath if I had not known the Sorath make a different sound altogether. The Sorath sound is a resonance drone that the training files describe as subsonic, meaning it registers below the range of conscious hearing, and this is technically accurate. What it means in practice is that you do not hear the Sorath's resting drone so much as you feel it. A warmth in the chest cavity, a pressure behind the sternum, as though the air in the corridor has become slightly thicker and more attentive than it was a moment ago. I stood in that thicker air and looked at Vale. She was looking at me without moving. The amber eye did not blink. The ridge plating did not shift. She was simply stopped, in the way that very large animals are sometimes simply stopped, not waiting, exactly, not threatening exactly, just occupying the corridor with the complete attention of a creature for whom occupying space is not an effort. I was late for my own graduation, I said quietly. The way you speak in a corridor where you do not want to make a scene. It's all right. I can go around. I do not know why I said that. I was talking to a Sorath. I am aware that Sorath do not speak compact standard, and that whatever she understood from my voice was not the literal meaning of my words. I am also aware, from the behavioral observer's citation, that what she understood from my voice was something. But at the time, I said it because I was in a hurry, and she was blocking the corridor, and it seemed like the thing to say. Vale's head moved, not toward me, not away. She lifted it, slowly, the way things that weigh what she weighs lift anything, and oriented it slightly forward, so she was no longer looking at me from the side, but was looking at me straight on. The amber eyes caught the strip lighting and did not blink. I stopped moving. The resonance drone changed. It is difficult to describe how it changed. The behavioral observer's citation describes it as a shift from the standard transit calm frequency to a frequency the registry catalogs as sustained orientation vocalization, and I trust that description because Neth Sorvak has 30 years in the field and I have none. What I can tell you is that the air in the corridor felt different, not threatening, not dangerous, just changed. The way the air in a room changes when someone you haven't seen in a long time walks in, and you haven't quite processed yet that it's them. Then Vale sat down. I want to be precise about what I mean by this. A Sorath does not sit the way a person sits, or the way the Felid packs in the training files sit. A Sorath folds. The forelimbs draw back and the mass of the animal settles onto its haunches, with a deliberateness that is not slow so much as intentional. Each movement a considered thing, a placement, a commitment. It is a posture the training files call the settled position, which the registry distinguishes from the rest position and the alert position. I did not know these terms at the time. I only knew that the very large animal that had been standing in the corridor was now sitting in the corridor, which meant her head was lower than it had been, and her eye was closer to my level, and the strip lighting caught the ridge plating differently. Less sharp, more steady, I said, because I could not think of anything else and the graduation was starting in 5 minutes. Okay. From somewhere to my left, in a very controlled voice, one of the handler teams said, "Cadet, please hold your position." I held my position. There was a long pause. The handler, I know now, was attempting the standard orientation command that should produce a Sorath movement toward the bay door. I did not know this at the time. I only knew that I was standing 15 meters from a sitting Sorath, with a transit form in my hand, and my ankle saw developing a genuine grievance, and someone had told me to hold my position, and I was holding it. The corridor was very quiet. The ventilation system continued in the subfloor. The resonance drone continued in the air. The handler in the controlled voice said, with slightly less control than before, "Cadet, do not make any further vocalizations." I had not made a vocalization since... Okay, I did not make one now. The corridor held. I found out later what was happening in the gallery during this period, because the behavioral observer's citation includes a careful timeline and because Doran, who was already in formation on the parade floor, told me afterward what the cadets had seen through the observation windows at the floor level, the long windows that look into the approach corridor on the east side, through which the ceremony production crew watches the entry queue. I did not know those windows existed. Most of my cohort did not know they existed. What I know now is that by the time Reth sat down, there were approximately 40 cadets pressing their faces to the east side observation windows, and the gallery's lower tier, seats 300 through 400, the row with the clearest sightline to the corridor windows, had gone from the ordinary pre-ceremony murmur to something closer to silence. I was not aware of any of this. I was aware of my ankle, and the transit form, and the 3 Sorath sitting in the corridor, and the handler who had asked me not to vocalize. What I did next was not a decision. I want the board to understand that. I did not choose to do it in the sense that I weighed options and selected an outcome. I did it the way you do things, when you are in an unfamiliar situation, and your body makes a practical choice before your mind catches up. I sat down on the corridor floor. My knees were already tired from the boot problem, and the corridor floor was smooth composite plating with a slight warmth from the subfloor ventilation, and Vale was sitting 2 meters in front of me looking at me with her pale amber eyes. And the graduation was clearly not starting on any schedule I could influence, and so I sat down cross-legged on the corridor floor and put the transit form on my knee and waited. The resonance drone changed again. I have read Neth Sorvak's description of this frequency. The citation calls it the sustained mutual proximity tone, which is a registry designation for the vocalization the Sorath produce when they are in close, sustained, voluntary proximity with a specific individual, when the proximity is chosen rather than assigned, maintained rather than tolerated. Sorvak notes that in 30 years of behavioral observation, including 4 previous passing ceremonies at which the Sorath were present, she has recorded this frequency twice. Both previous occasions were with certified long-term handlers. She notes, without emphasis but clearly, that the recording she made in the Vethkar approach corridor that morning was the third. I was not aware of the frequency's significance. I was aware that the chest warmth changed, became more present, more even, like the difference between a room with a draft and a room that is simply warm throughout. And I was aware that Vale, who had been sitting 2 meters in front of me, was now sitting approximately 1 meter in front of me. She had moved. I had not seen her move. One moment the distance was 2 meters, and then it was 1, which is how things move when they are large enough that their motion does not register as motion so much as it registers as a change in the state of the air. Her head was level with my chest. The amber eye was very close. I could see the detail of the iris. A deep amber, warm at the center and cooler at the edge, with the vertical pupil contracted to a thin line in the corridor lighting. The ridge plating along her brow caught the light at a new angle, and I could see the texture of it, matte and dense and close-grained, the way stone is close-grained when you are near enough to see it. She made a sound, not the subsonic drone, a sound, a low, even exhalation, not unlike the sound a very large dog makes when it settles itself somewhere it has decided to stay. I said quietly, "Hello. I am aware this was not a standard behavioral protocol. I have read the section of the training files that covers appropriate responses to proximity incidents with Class 1 compact animals. I can tell you that at the time I did not think of it as a proximity incident. I thought of it as a corridor and an animal, and what seemed like the appropriate thing to say. From the left wall, the handler's controlled voice said, 'Cadet.' I said, 'Yes?' A pause. Then, 'The ceremony has started.' I said, 'Oh.' I looked at Vale. Vale looked at me. Behind her, Reth and Orr were sitting in the corridor with the particular attentiveness of animals that have decided they are staying somewhere. The handler said, 'We are going to need you to stand up so that we can—' A pause. A longer pause than seemed warranted by the sentence. Then, 'Walk with them to the parade floor.' I looked at the handler for the first time. She was a woman in her 40s, in a compact handler division dress uniform with the silver bar insignia of a senior grade, and she was holding a direction baton at her side and looking at me with an expression I had not seen before and could not quite name. Not alarmed, not annoyed, something more careful than either. The expression of a person who has spent a great deal of professional time developing expertise in a specific field and has just encountered a data point that does not fit the existing model and is deciding whether to revise the model or the data point. I said, "Walk with them," she said. "They won't move without you." She said this with a steadiness that I understood. Even at 21, with 2.5 years of border service and no handler training, was costing her something. There is a way that experts talk about things outside their expertise, a particular combination of precision and reluctance, as though they are being very careful not to commit to a conclusion their training does not support, while still needing to communicate the fact in front of them. She said they won't move without you in exactly that way. Not as a failure, not as a surprise, as a fact that she was reporting accurately while reserving judgment on what it meant. I said, "All right." I stood up. The transit form went in my breast pocket. She looked at Vale. She looked at me. She said, with a care that I think she probably gave to very few things. Walk at a normal pace. Don't run. If any of them make a sound you haven't heard yet, stop walking and tell me. I said I would. I did not ask her what kind of sound to watch for. I thought this was because I trusted her professional judgment. I think now, it was because the honest answer would have been that every sound that Sorath made was a sound I hadn't heard yet, and that asking her to specify would have produced a list long enough to make the instruction useless. The board has Neth Sorvak's account of what the gallery saw. I can only tell the board what I experienced from the floor, which was substantially less comprehensible and considerably more confined. The access doors opened. The parade floor noise, all 4,000 cadets and the gallery and the ceremony sound system, resolved into a single, present roar that lasted approximately 2 seconds and then dropped to something that I have no better word for than quiet. 4,000 people can be very quiet when they want to be. The kind of quiet that is not the absence of noise, so much as it is the active presence of attention, a different quality of air, the same way the Sorath's drone was a different quality of air, but made of human awareness instead of subsonic vocalization. I walked through the doors and onto the parade floor. Vale walked beside me. I want to be precise, not behind me, not in front of me, beside me. At a lateral distance of approximately 2 meters, enough space that I was not in contact with her, enough that I could walk freely, but close enough that if I had extended my arm, I could have rested my hand on the ridge plating along her shoulder. I did not do this. I was trying to walk at a pace that seemed normal for a person entering a graduation ceremony they were already late to. I am not sure I achieved this. What I know is that I focused on where I was going, and put one foot in front of the other, and did not look at the gallery, behind Vale, and I know this from the citation, not from what I saw, because I was looking at where I was going. Rethenor followed in what the citation describes as the lateral flank configuration, the standard flanking arrangement that the Sorath use when moving with a specific individual across open ground, not the handler-follow configuration, not the standard transit configuration. The lateral flank, which the registry notes is typically established only after extended co-movement sessions and mutual proximity bonding, and which had apparently decided to simply establish itself on a parade floor in front of 4,000 witnesses after 11 minutes in an approach corridor with a cadet who needed to deliver a form. The gallery, per Sorvak's timeline, had been watching from the moment Vale sat down in the corridor. The lower tiers had gone quiet first. The rows closest to the floor level observation windows, who had seen it happen through the glass. The quiet had moved upward through the gallery tiers, the way quiet sometimes moves through crowds when the people at the front go still, and the people behind them catch the stillness and pass it along, not knowing specifically what they are going still for, but understanding from the quality of the attention around them that stillness is the appropriate response. By the time I walked through the access doors, all 4 tiers were quiet. I did not know this. I knew that it was quiet, and I knew that the floor was very large and very smooth, and extended a long way in every direction, and I knew that the formation lines of my graduating cohort were 20 meters ahead of me in a configuration I needed to join before Commander Vane noticed I was not in it. I knew that Vale was 2 meters to my right, and that the resonance drone was a steady warmth in the air, and that the handler, behind me, I could hear her footsteps, deliberate and unhurried, was providing what felt like a rearguard, though I could not have said precisely what she was guarding against or for. I reached the formation. Doran told me afterward that the line opened before I got there. He said the cadets on either side simply moved, without being told, without consulting each other, the way a crowd parts for something large when the crowd has understood that the large thing is coming, and that standing in its way is not the appropriate response. He said it was the quietest thing he had ever seen a formation do, because usually when a formation moves, there is a ripple of adjustment, weight shifting, feet repositioning, a small percussion of dress uniform against dress uniform. And this was nothing like that. He said, they just stepped back. I took my position in the formation line. The transit form was in my breast pocket. My ankle registered its continued protest. Vale sat down at my right side. The sound she made when she settled, the deliberate fold of that much weight onto the parade floor composite, was not loud. The hall was large enough and the composite was dense enough that it did not echo, but it was present, the way the weight of large things is present, and in the quiet of 4,000 people watching. It registered as clearly as the ceremony's own sound system would have registered anything. Reth arranged himself behind me, and slightly left, or took the position ahead, and slightly right, which Neth Sorvak's citation identifies as the triangle formation, the arrangement the Sorath use when they have designated an individual as their anchor point and have concluded that the surrounding environment requires monitoring. The monitoring, in this case, was 4,000 people and a presiding officer, and an entire ceremony's worth of compact officials. The Sorath appeared to find this neither alarming nor particularly demanding. They settled into their positions with the evenness of things that are confident about where they are. The gallery was so quiet I could hear the ventilation system. Commander Sereth Vane's prepared remarks were on the dais in front of him. I know what the remarks contained, because the post-ceremony administrative file includes a copy. They were good remarks. They were the kind of remarks that people write when they have been asked to convey weight to a room full of young people who have not yet learned the shape of what they are taking on, and who need someone with 30 years in the institution to stand in front of them and describe the shape of clearly. The remarks covered the history of the border service, its losses, its achievements, its purpose. They covered the scale of the work and the depth of the commitment. They were built around a central image, the Sorath, which Commander Vane had planned to deploy at exactly the right moment of the remarks, turning to indicate the animals as they entered the ceremony lane, as the embodiment of the stakes, the thing you are protecting against, the thing that makes the work real. The Sorath were currently sitting in a triangle formation around a cadet who was holding her citation paperwork with both hands and trying not to look up at the gallery. Commander Vane looked at the parade floor. He looked at the prepared remarks. He looked at the senior handler, who was standing 6 meters back from the access doors, with her direction baton at her side, and an expression I could not see from my position in the formation, but which Sorvak's citation describes as composed and professional and entirely unreadable. He looked at me. He looked at Vale. He was quiet for a longer time than seemed to be part of the ceremony's plan. Then he cleared his throat, and the sound system carried it up to all 4 tiers of the gallery, with the same faithfulness that it would have carried anything, and he said, "We will begin the citation presentation." He put his prepared remarks down on the dais. Not aside, down. Flat on the surface, text facing down, the way you set something aside when you have decided that this particular occasion will not be served by the thing you prepared for a different Sorvak's citation. I did not see him do this. Sorvak's citation describes it. I was looking at the formation and trying to remember the protocol for stepping forward when your name was called. The cohort citation presentation works by alphabetical order within each cohort group, which meant the cadets at the far end of the formation were called forward first and worked toward my end. I was toward the middle of my cohort group. I stood in the formation line for approximately 20 minutes, while the names ahead of me were called, and the cadets ahead of me walked forward to the dais and received their citations and walked back and took their places. During this time, the Sorath did not move. Vale sat at my right side. Reth held his position behind me and left, or held his position ahead and right. The resonance drone was a steady warmth in the air around me. The formation cadets on either side of my position, Cadet Tevin Noss to my left and Cadet Seladrath to my right, were, per their post-ceremony statements, aware of the resonance drone as a physical sensation, and were experiencing it as, in Noss's words, like standing next to something that has decided you are fine. In Drath's words, I didn't feel scared. I felt like the area I was standing in was being taken care of. I was not having a particularly dramatic internal experience. I was standing in formation with an ankle that hurt and a transit form in my breast pocket and 3 Sorath around me, and I was watching the names being called and trying to remember whether I was supposed to step forward on the first syllable of my name or wait for the full name to be spoken. This is the kind of thing I focus on in high-stakes situations. I find it useful. The names advanced. Commander Vane's voice was steady and professional. He called each name and presented each citation with the same cadence he would have used if the parade floor contained only cadets and no compact apex war beasts arranged in a triangle formation around a third from last border service graduate. I thought this showed something about him. The kind of composure that is not performance but practice. The composure of a man who has been doing difficult things in formal contexts for 30 years and has learned that the ceremony itself is a kind of structure that holds people up when the situation gets complicated, and that dismantling the structure mid-ceremony because the situation is complicated would help no one. He called the names. He presented the citations. He was very good at it. Cadet Cale Marin. I stepped forward. Vale stood up. The gallery made a sound. Not a gasp exactly. More the collective intake of 4,000 people adjusting their understanding of a situation in real time. The sound of a crowd discovering that what they thought was a fixed situation has a new variable, and that the new variable is very large and is moving. It lasted less than a second. Then the gallery was quiet again, because Vale was not moving fast and was not moving threateningly, and was simply walking, at 2 meters to my right, in the direction I was walking, with the steady, unhurried purpose of something that has decided where it is going, and is going there. I walked to the dais. The 40 meters from my formation position to the dais was the longest 40 meters I have ever walked. Not because of anything that happened, but because I was aware of all 4,000 people watching it, and I had nowhere useful to put that awareness, so I put it in my feet and watched where I was going. Commander Vane looked at me. He looked at Vale. He held the citation. I reached out and took it with both hands, the way the ceremony protocol specified, and I held it and looked at Commander Vane, and Commander Vane looked at me. His face, in that moment, was the face of a man who has spent a very long time building something. A ceremony, a career, a particular understanding of what weight looks like and how to convey it, and who is standing in the middle of that thing watching it become something he did not build and cannot account for, and who is deciding, in real time, whether this is a loss or a different kind of success. I do not know what he decided. I know he nodded. A small, precise nod, the kind that carries a great deal of meaning in a limited motion. And then I turned and walked back to the formation. Vale walked beside me. Behind me, I know this from the citation, Reth and Orr had maintained their triangle positions while I walked forward, and as I walked back, they adjusted to restore the configuration, Reth tracking left rear, Orr right front, so that by the time I reached my position in the formation line, the triangle was complete again, and the Sorath were exactly where they had been, as though I had not moved at all. I took my position. The citation was warm from Commander Vane's hands. I held it at my side and let my breathing settle. The ceremony continued. The remaining names were called. The remaining cadets walked forward and received their citations and walked back. The formation held. The gallery was very quiet for the remainder of the presentation. The deep, present quiet that Doran later told me he had never heard in a ceremony before. The quiet that is not reverence exactly, but is the posture that reverence produces. The body's way of saying, this is the thing. This is the real one. This is the moment I will remember. Commander Vane reached the end of the citation list. He paused. The ceremony's protocol called for the presiding officer to deliver closing remarks and then invite the graduating class to receive the gallery's cassid recognition in the traditional form. The presiding officer's prepared closing remarks were on the dais, face down. He said, "This concludes the citation presentation for the Compact Border Service graduating class, Vethkar Station, this cycle. The graduating class is formally recognized." He said it simply, without elaboration. It was not the closing he had planned. It was the closing that fit. The gallery stood. I do not mean some of the gallery stood. I do not mean the gallery applauded politely, in the way that galleries applaud at formal ceremonies when the occasion calls for it. I mean 4,000 people rose from their seats at what Neth Sorvak's citation logs as 1117 station time, and did not sit back down for 4 minutes and 20 seconds. The sound of 4,000 people standing in a hall that size is not a sound so much as a physical fact. The pressure. The quality of the space. It is a statement made by 4,000 bodies at once, and it is not subtle. I stood in the formation and I did not know what to do with my hands, so I held the citation with both of them and looked at the parade floor directly in front of me, because looking at the gallery seemed too large a thing to manage. Vale moved. She did not go anywhere. She turned. That slow, intentional turning of something her size, and she oriented herself toward me, and she lowered her head to my level. I have read everything the registry has recorded about the Sorath head-lowering behavior. The papers do not agree on its precise meaning. Some of the older documentation calls it a subordination display, which Sorvak's citation explicitly notes is inaccurate, and which Sorvak argues has caused significant misunderstanding of Sorath's social behavior over the past 40 years. Sorvak's preferred term is acknowledgement of peer, a recognition behavior that the Sorath perform, rarely and specifically, when they have concluded that the individual in front of them belongs to the same category as themselves. Not in rank, not in size. In something the registry papers struggle to name cleanly, and which the older handlers, in the informal terminology that develops around any animal when people have spent long enough with them, call simply knowing. Vale lowered her head. Her amber eye was level with my face. The ridge plating along her brow was close enough that I could see the individual plates. Each one matte iron, each one distinct, each one warm, from whatever warmth the Sorath carry inside that ridge plate structure. The resonance drone was a steady, even presence in my chest. Not the transit calm frequency, not the sustained orientation. Something lower and more settled, something the registry has no clean name for, that Sorvak in her citation describes as the terminal acknowledgement vocalization, a frequency she states she has recorded only twice before in 30 years, both times at the moment a certified handler was formally separated from a pack they had worked with for more than a decade. The frequency of a Sorath that has made a decision and is at peace with it. I raised my right hand, slowly, in the way you move around animals that are paying attention to you, and I put it on the ridge plate above her eye. It was warm. That is the specific thing I remember. Not surprisingly warm, not alarmingly warm, just warm. The way a living thing is warm when it is at rest, and comfortable in occupying the space it has chosen to occupy. The plate was smooth at the center, and ridged at the edge, and dense under my palm, in the way that things are dense when they have decided to hold their ground. I said, very quietly, "Thank you." I do not know if she understood that either. I think she might have understood something. The resonance drone deepened by a register I could not name but felt clearly. A settling, an evenness, the quality that very large things have when they are entirely certain about where they are. She stayed with her head lowered for a moment that I did not count, and then she straightened, slowly, and sat back at my right side. Behind me, the gallery was still standing. I want to tell the board about the moment after the gallery stood, because it is the thing I think about most when I think about that morning, and because it is not fully in the Behavioral Observer's citation, which ends at 11:21 station time. Doran found me in the transit lounge 2 hours after the ceremony. He sat down across from me and put a cup of station tea in front of me, and looked at me the way people look at someone they've just seen something happen to and aren't sure how much of it registered. I said, "Was it very visible?" He said, "Yes." I said, "The whole gallery?" He said, "All 4 tiers, from the moment you walked in." He said, I know. I said, I didn't do anything. I just sat down. He looked at me for a moment, with the expression he uses when he thinks I am being literal in a situation that requires something more. Then he said, Kale, you sat down on the corridor floor in your dress uniform in front of 3 Sorath, that nobody in that building could move, and you said hello, and they stayed, and then you walked onto the parade floor next to an animal the size of a transport vehicle, and you didn't look up at the gallery once, and you went and got your citation like you were just getting your citation. I thought about that. He said, they stood for you. I said, they stood for the Sorath. He thought about this for a moment, the way Doran thinks about things, honestly, without rushing. But the Sorath stood for you, which means 4,000 people stood for the thing the Sorath was standing for, which is you. He paused. Whether you were trying to do anything or not. I did not have an answer for this. I finished the tea. He said, quietly, looking at the table. 3rd from last in simulations, I said. 2nd from last by the end. He said, right. And he smiled, and we sat there for a while in the transit lounge with the station sounds around us, which were ordinary and unremarkable, and exactly the sounds a station always makes, and which I found extremely comfortable. I should tell the board about the compact behavioral registry officer who came to see me the morning after the ceremony. Her name is Sorvak Veth, not Neth Sorvak, who filed the citation, a different officer, from the registry's anchor election documentation unit, which I had not previously known existed. She was in her 50s, in a registry uniform with a grade designation I did not recognize, and she carried a document portfolio that she opened on the table in the transit lounge where I was eating my morning meal ration. She said she had some questions about the incident for the formal record. I said that was fine. She asked me to describe, in my own words, the moment I sat down on the corridor floor. I described it. She wrote notes. She asked me what I had been thinking about when I sat down. I said I had been thinking about my ankle, and that the graduation was not starting on any schedule I could influence. She wrote this down. She asked whether I had been thinking about the Sorath. I said I had been aware of them, because it would have been difficult not to be, but that I had not been thinking about them in the sense of having a strategy for the situation. She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, the anchor election frequency is the Sorath's formal designation of an individual as a pack-adjacent anchor contact. It requires mutual proximity time. It requires repeated voluntary approach. In almost every documented case, it develops over a period of weeks or months of consistent interaction. I sat down. She looked at me again with the expression of someone who has been doing their work for a long time and has just encountered something that is going to require a new category. Then she wrote something in her portfolio and closed it and thanked me for my time. I went back to my meal ration. I thought about what she had said. I thought, 11 minutes. I had sat on the corridor floor for 11 minutes. It had not felt like 11 minutes. It had felt like a reasonable amount of time for a situation that was not moving. This is, I think, part of what Doran was trying to describe in the transit lounge. Some things take the time they take, and the person who is not measuring the time does not notice that the time is significant. The board has asked me whether I believe the event has implications for my upcoming posting at Outer Station Drevak. I have thought about this question carefully. The posting is a Class 3 frontier station, which means it is small and distant, and staffed primarily by people who have drawn the assignments that the larger, better-resourced postings did not want. The station log for the past 4 cycles shows 3 significant equipment failures, 1 administrative dispute that resulted in a formal review, and a compact wildlife file that has not been updated in 11 months. I reviewed this information when the posting notification arrived. I also reviewed the wildlife file, which is brief and which notes, in the final entry from 11 months ago, that the station's outer perimeter has recorded regular proximity events involving a Sorath pack. Designation Outer 7, 4 adults and 1 sub-adult, whose territorial range includes the station's eastern fence line. The entry notes that the pack has not been formally identified or catalogued beyond a head count, that no handler certification for the station's personnel is on file, and that the proximity events are currently classified as non-incident per the Compact's Standing Wildlife Adjacency Protocol. I have noted this. The board has also asked whether I plan to request a transfer. I do not. I have asked whether the transit form I submitted on the morning of the ceremony was successfully processed. The desk clerk confirmed that it was. The form cleared the same afternoon. I want the board to understand that I am aware I am not the same cadet I was when I arrived at Vethkar Station. 12 weeks ago, something happened in that corridor, and something happened on that parade floor, and Doran is right that they stood for me. And I know, the way you know things that your body understood before your mind did, that whatever the Sorath saw in me on that morning was past something real, something I had not manufactured for the occasion, but I also know that I was not trying to earn it. I was trying to deliver a form. I was trying not to be late. I was trying to find somewhere to put my hands that was not visibly awkward when 4,000 people stood up in a gallery, and the resonance drone of a Sorath Alpha, deepened by a register that settled something in my chest that had not, until that moment, been settled. What I know is this. The Sorath saw something calm, something that was not performing being calm, something that sat down on a corridor floor because the alternative was to stand in a corridor being late, and standing in a corridor being late seemed worse. Something that said hello to an apex warbeast the way you say hello to anything that is paying attention to you and deserves a response. I think that is the thing, if the board wants my honest opinion. I think the Sorath saw that I was not performing anything. I think that in an approach corridor full of handlers and protocol teams and ceremony logistics, and then in a passing hall full of 4,000 people in formal dress, watching a military institution remind its graduating class of the weight of its responsibilities. and I was just a person standing in a corridor with something I needed to do, and I was not afraid of them, and I was not performing being unafraid of them. I was just in a hurry. The board has asked me whether I have given any thought to how I will conduct myself at Outer Station Drevak relative to the wildlife adjacency situation on the eastern fence line. I have given it some thought. The Sorath Pack designated Outer 7 has a subadult listed in the registry file. Subadults, in the Sorath social structure, occupy a particular position. They are past the stage where they follow the Alpha's movement entirely, and not yet at the stage where they have established their own territorial patterns. They explore, they assess. They sit at fence lines at 05:30 in the morning and watch the people doing perimeter walks, and they file a record of what they see in whatever way the Sorath file records, which is not a way that the registry has been able to fully document. The subadult at Outer Station Drevak's eastern fence line has been doing this for at least 11 months since the last log entry was made. 11 months of watching the duty officer do the perimeter walk. 11 months of being noted in the log as present and then not interacted with, per protocol. I have thought about what 11 months of that looks like from the subadult's side. I have also thought about what it is going to look like from my side when I am doing the 05:30 perimeter walk and there is a Sorath subadult at the fence line. The answer is that it is going to look like a fence, and a Sorath, and the morning, and me. And I am going to say, good morning, because that is what you say when something is paying attention to you, and then I am going to walk the rest of the perimeter and file my log entry. And the log entry is going to say what it always says, which is present, non-incident, per protocol. I am aware that this may not be entirely accurate. The Sorath Pack designated Outer 7 has a subadult listed in the registry file. The subadult does not have an individual name in the file, because the file has not been updated in 11 months, and naming requires extended observation, which the file notes has not been conducted. I have noted this as something that should be corrected. The eastern fence line perimeter walk at Outer Station Drevak, according to the operational log, is currently conducted twice daily by the duty officer. The log notes that the Sorath Pack is typically present at the eastern fence line during the early morning walk between 05:30 and 06:30 station time, and that the current protocol is to note the presence and continue without interaction. I think the current protocol is reasonable. I do not intend to modify it without authorization. I also think that if I am conducting an early morning perimeter walk and there is a Sorath subadult at the fence line, I will probably say good morning. I am aware this is not a formal behavioral protocol. It is what I would do. It is what I did in the corridor at Vethkar Station, and the results of that were reviewed favorably by the Compact Behavioral Registry and the Honors Board, so I think it is defensible. I am going to Outer Station Drevak. The eastern fence line has a Sorath Pack that has not been catalogued. The wildlife file has not been updated in 11 months. I will bring forms this time, in case the desk is closed. Vale is in the handler files as of last week, as a restricted access anchor election registration, which means she is formally associated with my compact personnel number, and the registry is tracking any future proximity events involving her pack. Relative to my station assignments, I was told this by the registry officer who processed the notation. I asked what that meant in practical terms. She said, "It means if you end up somewhere she is, the registry knows." I thought about the warmth of the ridge plating under my hand, and the resonance drones settling into something even and certain, and the gallery standing, and Doran's voice in the transit lounge saying the Sorath stood for you. I said, that seems about right. The registry officer who told me this was a precise woman in her 40s, who had the manner of someone who has spent a long time keeping careful records and has a great deal of respect for accuracy. She had told me about the Anchor election registration in the same tone she would have used to tell me about any administrative matter, which is to say clearly and without editorializing. She had asked if I had any questions. I had asked how often Anchor election registrations resulted in actual proximity events at assigned stations. She had paused for a moment. Then she had said, "This is the first one we have logged for a border service posting." I said, "I'll send reports." She said, "Please. The board has no further questions. I have no further statements. I request that the transit form be formally noted in the record as having been successfully submitted, because it took me 3 tries, and I think that deserves acknowledgement. Thank you."